What is the most interesting rabbit hole that you found on the internet? Story 1, the Orion's Arm Worldbuilding Group. This is a very rich and detailed setting 10,000 years in humanity's future. It details our diaspora out to the stars and into different species and civilization types. It features godlike AI, Dyson spheres, nanoecologies, artificial wormholes, future histories, multi-generational space arcs, exoplanets, great museum ships, and much, much more. As its aim is to be a fleshed-out, hard sci-fi setting, it is also a very educational, encouraging study of subjects related to its pages and posts. There are even a couple of paperback books published using this setting. The Orion's Arm setting has been built up over 17 years and is indeed very much a rabbit hole. Story 2, when the first Cloverfield movie was building hype, I got really into the ARG that dealt with the background of the movie and the monster. Searching for clues took me to all sorts of corners of the internet. Various fan sites, conspiracy forums, dead ends that trolls would set up. Eventually, I found myself on a website that rattled me. It detailed a supposed top secret mission in which contact had been made with alien life on a planet in the Alpha Centauri system, and astronauts were sent to check it out using tech the aliens had described to us. There were lots of boring documents uploaded that corroborated little parts of the story, as well as a timeline of events. It ended with a couple astronauts choosing to stay and live with the aliens in order to learn about them better, and then returning several years later, dying from radiation exposure. There was just something so special about how that site was presented that made it feel real. I wonder if I'll ever find it again. Story 3, as someone who was raised Mormon, reading objective history about the church and its founder, Joseph Smith. It's really hard to explain to someone outside this church or others, but we're taught that the only truth is what church doctrine or leaders say. It all seems so silly looking back now, but when you're raised that reading anything not church approved is extremely dangerous, and you could eventually lose your family and friends over it. It messes with you. I can't even begin to describe the rabbit hole I went down. It was scary, sometimes funny, but ultimately life-changing for the better. Story 4, you can spend hours reading about Frank D'Angelo and barely scratch the surface. He owns a beverage company and some Italian restaurants in Toronto, but he's also created a vanity movie and music career for himself. He makes low-budget movies starring himself, but also featuring many recognizable, though hardly A-list, actors. And he records all the soundtrack music himself. Oh, he has a talk show or infomercial called The Being Frank Show, for which he buys time on a Hamilton TV station. This alone would make him a fascinating character. But then you also find out about the businesses he's run into the ground, and his trial for statutory assault, for which he was acquitted, even though the judge thought he was probably guilty. And most recently, pharmaceutical executive Barry Sherman, his best friend who floated D'Angelo millions of dollars for his business and entertainment ventures, was murdered along with his wife. Just don't talk about him on Twitter too much. He'll threaten to sue and then block you. Story 5, the Montauk Project. I've been trying to find conventional ways to introduce this to people. Don't have the patience and time to watch the entire interview. Then Strange Things comes out and it's literally based off of it. There was a nod in the Netflix version of Death Note, but I've watched the raw interview like 5 times, and I just sit there and try to imagine what I would have done if I was just a security guard or some low-level pleb that just happened to see a glimpse of half of what they were talking about. Story 6, Dmitri the Lover, aka Dr. James Sears. For years, he was infamous as a self-described pickup artist. He sold courses on how to seduce women. His Twitter gave insane and nonsensical and misogynistic tips. He was a doctor, but his medical license was revoked for assaulting female patients. Surprise! More recently, he has gotten into politics and has run at various levels of government. He will be running for mayor of Toronto this year. His political party is extremist. He runs a local newsletter that is extremely hate-filled and disturbing. He is an assault apologist, has an extremist fan club, etc., etc. He also kind of looks like Tommy Wiseau. He would be hilarious if he wasn't so scary. Story 7. Goddamn TV tropes will ruin your life. You go on there to look up one trope or one piece of media, and you end up digressing onto another trope. Then you can't help but look up all the media examples of that trope, which almost invariably leads you to another interesting sounding trope, which then makes you want to look up both the sub-tropes and the examples of each. It's like getting caught in a hypercube. It looks simple enough till you're inside and find that it has like 64,000 subsections. You should only use it as a last resort, like, I don't know, Might Guy's Eighth Gate, or Ichigo's Final Getsuga, or I don't know, the Mafuba. Why can't I think of any non anime examples? Might have to head to TV Tropes and look up a few. Crap. Story 8, Camouflage. I was curious about the effectiveness of universal camos, and man, did I go down a rabbit hole. I ended up studying the Army's Phase 4 Camouflage Improvement Program, landed on pages about multispectral camo to work in all wavelengths, landed on comparison of different camo via still takes on YouTube, to how they effectively camouflage by breaking your shadows and silhouette through clever techniques that mess with depth perception and whatnot. Eventually to face paint and the different techniques to break up our pareidolia, seeing faces and things by proportions, portion, shadows, etc. Habits. Story 9, Freddy Freaker and the Freak Phone. Started as a meme, but I became genuinely curious. Freddy Freaker was one of those call to talk to a character phone line scams from the 80s that aired on MTV. Because these commercials were way more popular than their products, nobody really called Freddy, and there's no documentation of what would happen. Some Redditors reported Freddy telling them a joke. The guy who created the puppet said, it might have been a party line. And some people claimed they'd tell scary stories. Turns out this Freddy character was more than just a Jesus pose puppet on a green screen. The creator had prototype t-shirts and action figures, and rumors of other freakers floated around, notably Freddy's girlfriend and his best friend. This mystery, fueled by the meme, led to the creation of a Freddy Freaker Facebook page, in which the creator of the page revealed himself to be Freddy Freaker's creator. Now he's posting images of the puppet and unreleased toys, commenting on memes, and answering questions about the phone line. I think there's also rumors of using this meme to produce new Freddy Freaker toys or something, but don't quote me on that. Story 10. The proponents of Panspermia are vehemently certain the inception of life on Earth began when microscopic life forms, after enduring the rigors of space, collided with the planet and began to colonize it. A precursor, it's theorized, usually extremophiles, were imbued into the debris from collisions of stars and planets, and it inadvertently found its way to Earth. The initiation of life is never actually speculated upon, only how it arrived, and not how it survived or evolved. Most disconcerting, I found myself amongst flat Earth advocates at that moment, so I abandoned any nascent intrigue to the recesses of the conspiracy boards. Story 11 years ago, someone discovered that users of a specific brand of security camera system didn't properly lock down their systems, meaning they still used a default URL ID cell to access their feeds. This made it easy to search for that default string and turn up hundreds of security camera feeds online from all over the world pointing at various stuff. I found someone's post about it on a forum, did a search, lost an evening checking out all kinds of feeds. I remember bored folks on 4chan would pick through these and post lists of active ones. I picked a random one and watched an old American couple eat breakfast in their big, gaudy kitchen. It felt very creepy. I hope they got different cameras. But it was also oddly compelling for how mundane it was. Here's all these windows into the boring minutiae of other people happening right now. Actual reality TV. Arbitrary and often dull. Story 12. Honestly, I used to love going down the Incel's rabbit hole before it was banned. It was sort of like a car accident. Awful, but I couldn't look away. Every once in a blue moon, I'd just get lost in all the recent top posts. Part of it was hate reading, but more so, I think, there was a lot of fascination. As a woman who also works in the adult industry, that perspective and mindset is so far removed from mine. It was interesting to see how drastically different two people can view and experience the same world. I think their view is gross, warped, and twisted. But it also makes me wonder, what could I have twisted that I don't even realize? Story 13. If you like reading horror / sci-fi / creepypasta, you need to check out this community. The whole thing is written as a series of reports on various anomalies and a secret organization attempts to contain said anomalies. There's novelty to the secret government reports framing device, but the real gold lies in the sheer volume and variety of stories, ranging from cliché things like an indestructible monster, a key that opens anything, to wildly strange things like a mirror portal to an oddly specific dimension, or a giant clockwork device that refines things in a vague, non-specific way, or a large amorphous blob that acts like a puppy and excretes super antidepressant slime. Like the trope about TV tropes, it's easy to lose hours jumping from one entry to another as they frequently reference each other, especially in the experiment logs, where they often will see how different CP react to one another. Let's put a creature that has the power to relax anything in a room with a monster that is in a constant state of complete rage and see what happens. Story 14, The Great Glitter Mystery. There is a company in NJ that is the top glitter manufacturer in the world. When being interviewed, they were asked who their biggest client was. They refused to answer, saying, they don't want people to know. Cue millions of people speculating on who the biggest glitter client in the world is and why they want to keep it secret. Story 15, I went down the rabbit hole about the Silk Road Marketplace, the illegal black market site on the deep web. I always found it fascinating that one singular dude was able to attribute so much to drug trafficking simply from his laptop. The whole story's so intriguing to me. It's actually one of the reasons I went into my current field, which is cybersecurity. The internet is such a vast and enormous place. The amount of crime that occurs simply from people's computers has always mind-boggled me. Story 16, The American Chestnut Blight. What was once the redwood of the East Coast was practically wiped out in the early 20th century due to imports of trees from Asia that contained the blight fungus but were resistant. Today we have the technology to bring back the American chestnut, using minor gene modification, I believe, from wheat, but I don't believe federal approval has yet been granted to reintroduce. To me, this is a fascinating bit of science, where we have the power to bring back an almost forgotten, yet iconic species. I find this an incredibly interesting topic, and went down quite the rabbit hole. True story. I'm an attorney representing the United States in cases brought against it. For these reasons, I had to go meet with staff at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park HQ, just outside of Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Their HQ building is beautiful, an awesome stone building built during the WPA days of the Depression. I went inside and was in the lobby waiting for the park superintendent when I spotted the wall, all hardwood 16 by 8, panels of unblemished, gorgeous American chestnut. I've never seen so much in one place. The superintendent came out to see me running both of my hands on the wall and probably groaning. He laughed. I turned to see him. I was totally embarrassed. And as I started to apologize, he waved it away and said, still laughing, chestnut will do that to a man. The day doesn't go by. I won't touch a wall here. Story 17. Someone stole one of my parents' identities and wrote many thousands of dollars in checks out of a joint account, which was at that time my primary account. The individual changed my parents' home address to be in Texas, ordered the checks to an address in Texas, and forged them to make it look like it was payment for in-home skilled nursing care. Nobody in my family uses such care or has ever lived in Texas. We filed police reports, completed affidavits, and jumped through all kinds of hoops. Due to the ineptitude of the bank, it took over 6 months to both have the money returned and to shut it all down, because the bank kept doing things like refunding money to the compromised account or continuing to allow the individual to update the home address to the one in Texas. So when the bank sent a request for a police report and affidavit, they sent it to the person, which led to us receiving death threats by text. Luckily, they don't appear to be credible. They were just mad that they couldn't steal our money anymore. Story 18, Oscar Wilde. And this was in the early 80s when no one was interested in studying him, his works, or his life. He was essentially still persona non grata, even in university literature courses. And I'm a straight female. I was interested in a British actor who was cast as the lead in a play focused on Wilde. I wanted to know why they would cast him. I was at university at the time and at the library, so I pulled a biography by Frank Harris and started reading it. It read like a gossip rag, which made me suspicious. So I pulled another biography, this one by Hesketh Pearson, and kept reading. I got totally sucked in by the tragedy of his life. His wife and 2 sons' lives were also wrecked, and I really can't tell you why I kept researching them. I wasn't interested in reading Wilde's work, only about his life. A few months later, I moved to Chicago, which had a great many used bookstores on Clark Street that are gone now. I scoured them for every Wilde biography I could get my hands on. I continued doing this for 20 years across 3 states, and also during a study abroad semester in London. It didn't matter whether the books were printed in 1905 or in the 80s. They were inexpensive because nobody was really interested. I've collected over 250 books and other related items about him. Interest in him exploded in 2000 because that was the centenary of his death. I had also discovered the internet, and at first I was thrilled. People that I could talk about Wilde with. New books would be published on him. More new stuff to read. Story 19, Sovereign Citizens. Between the police body cam footage of traffic stops to their in-court appearances where they try to represent themselves. My sick fascination. A part of it is quite sad because these people have made awful decisions in life, but on the other hand, they're choosing to live within delusion, and the consequences are satisfying to see. I shot an interview with a police officer a while back who talked about the freemen on the land types. He said that they tried as hard as possible to point these people into just not doing that, but they would always decide on the worst possible course of action, like having everyone stand around in the pissing rain while they argue that they weren't driving, they were traveling, and therefore they cannot be done for doing 50 and a 20 limit kind of thing. The TLDW was that laws are not magic spells, and the intent is the most important thing. And if you get done for something minor and silly, don't try to play word games to get out of it. Story 20, The Trials Game, Easter Egg, and Treasure Hunt. There is a series of video games that people are probably at least vaguely familiar with called Trials. It's a game in which you ride a bicycle or motorcycle from point A to point B and ride over obstacles, do flips, etc. I've never actually played it, so apologies if it's not a great description. In a nutshell, players found some items and locations in the game that seemed to be related. Someone figured out that it appeared to be a puzzle that spanned multiple versions of the game. The puzzle was wildly complicated, including things like secret websites, real-life locations across the globe, analyzing sound waves from songs, etc. The last step that was established was that someone needed to be in a specific location to receive a package in the year 2100 or something. Story 21, back in the early 2000s, I stumbled upon a website where the only content was this one man's Walmart receipts. He'd go shopping, then scan and upload his receipts for people to see and comment on. He'd done this for a few years by the time I found his website. I spent like 3 days looking at Walmart receipts because, after a while, they kind of started to tell a story. The guy got married, had a kid, and I left off around the time the kid was potty trained. It was like a journal written in Walmart receipts. You could follow him through the seasons, whether he had a cold, birthday cards and gifts for family, and see the growth of his child all through his Walmart purchases. It was fascinating. Story 22, Morgellons disease forms and subreddits. It's a condition where people believe fibers, threads, and bugs are emerging from their skin. The majority medical opinion is that this is a mental condition and not a physical one. The forums can get really weird with people uploading microscopic photos of wounds they dug into their own skin to prove the fibers are there. I work in dermatology. I've had a few people that would send us pictures of the thread/bugs/ etc. They would dig out of their body. Had to explain more than once, "You are tearing out adipose tissue and muscle. Please stop." One woman used a fish hook to dig at her face. There was no skin left on 75% of her face. Others used pliers or whatever random tools they had at their disposal. Another woman was covered head to toe with infected lesions that she would just not leave alone. No matter how many times we dressed her wounds and referred her to wound care, she would take them off as soon as she got home and resume picking. Eventually ended up in the ICU with sepsis, and I believe she passed as we never heard from her again. Very sad to see because they get mad, frustrated when you explain they need psychiatric help to manage it. We can heal the skin, but only if they curb the actual behaviors. Story 23. One of my favorite books is Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. One of my favorite movies growing up was Flight of Dragons. I randomly fell down a rabbit hole and found out they are super connected. A guy wrote a fictional natural history book called The Flight of Dragons, and he was inspired to write it after reading Wizard of Earthsea because he was so curious how her dragons would maintain flight. Rabbit hole kept going, but I just found such joy in knowing a lot of the things I loved as a child were so connected. Story 24, this is back when Facebook was actual people, in like 2010 to 2012, and not just bots and ads. I was still Facebook friends with some former childhood friends that we have drifted apart long ago, and now they've grown to be associated with scumbags. My favorite Sunday pastime while recovering from a hangover on the couch would be to peruse their very public craziness. One day I saw a nutty status that one of my former scumbag associates commented on, so it appeared on my feed. I decided to dive into his rabbit hole. This dude I never met's profile was dozens of posts, multiple paragraphs long, that he posted rapid fire. It was like the unhinged ravings of a madman, and it was awesome. I spent like 3 hours that afternoon going through them. They included content about aliens, God, demons, government conspiracy, flat earth, crystal orbs, the power of love, and the soul. You name it. Finally, I got to the first somewhat sane post that read, I paraphrase, "Going to try Ket for the first time? Wish me luck." I died laughing right. It was like a 3 hour setup to one of the most amazing, unintentional jokes. Story 25, Oklahoma City Obituaries. This was last night when I had insomnia. Clicked on a Reddit account whose last comment was late 2022. The last couple posts were about her being old and ill, possibly it being her last Thanksgiving. She had a lot of comments to read through, a lot of Breaking Bad, animals, and her family. Many little anecdotes painting a picture of who she is or was. Estranged daughter in the Navy and how she's heartbroken. She doesn't even know her granddaughter's name. An adult autistic son who relied on her being a stay-at-home mom. Her older husband was in the military, so that they had to move a lot and how he's bad with money. She's wheelchair-bound and attached to an oxygen tank, but she still wanted to get her stories out somehow. She posted frequently on the Oklahoma City subreddit, and her age, so I went Googling. Story 26, Operation Legacy. The British government's apparently successful, ongoing operation to hide all the atrocities Britain has committed over the centuries. They were still operating concentration camps, a concept they invented, in Africa up to the 1960s. I got into it after talking to several Brits about the Irish potato famine. They learned in school that the government sent food aid and set up various support schemes to help out. That's where their education about it stops. They don't learn that those schemes were stopped after a few months, and the government switched priorities to exporting food from Ireland for the rest of the famine years. The famine went on for 7 years. After that, I looked at what they did in India and all over Africa. British people have no idea. All of it done in their name. This isn't history. The last government passed legislation to cover up what the army and security services did in Northern Ireland. The current government is under pressure from the ICC and UN and families of victims to reverse it. I'm not saying what they did was either wrong or right, but they're covering it up. So, Story 27, I used to research the evil crap common companies do in the US and overseas. Nestle is one most people are aware of nowadays, but they also own several other water mining companies disguised as local brands. I heard of one nearby crappy deal and found the water rights were handed over for a measly few $1,000s bribe. Nestle said they'd even dig us another water source, so we'd be all set. They did dig another well, but it was shoddy work and dried up almost immediately, leading to major drought in the area that persists to this day. Lil corporate bait and switch. I guess it's not that weird, but I still find it weird that companies can do evil crap like this and never face anything more than a fine. They know they have the resources to say and do anything they'd like.